Good afternoon to all of you from Thailand, wherever you may be. Okay. Thank you for registering for this publishing webinar that is actually customized for you. So today's webinar will be focused on publishing in international journals, open access and predatory journals. All right. And it will last about 60 to 70 minutes. Okay. And then there will be a question and answer. Okay, so you can either post your questions to me via chat, the Zoom chat, or you can also ask it via the voice. Okay, so now let's move on. Okay, oops, sorry. Okay, just give me a minute. I am going to do some security, so I am unable. Okay. So let's continue. All right. Okay, so today's topics. Okay, so basically there'll be a self-introduction, myself. Then we'll move on to part one on the academic publishing landscape, about the press itself, Cambridge University Press. Then in part two, which is the main gist of this webinar actually. So we'll talk about the type, what is an academic journal or scholarly journal, how do you shortlist journals, submit your papers, okay, how to submit the papers and how to write it, you know, very briefly, of course, and what is the peer review process like for journals, and how would you actually respond to the reports of the referees, and then of course we move on to publishing ethics. And then the third part will be on open research, preprints, open access, and predatory journals, conferences, and towards the end, I'll just show a few slides to show you the kind of resources that we would have, okay, to support your publishing, whether in journals or books or any other format. And then towards the end, there'll be a quick question and answer. All right. So just a quick self-introduction. My name is Joe. Okay, Joe Ng. I'm based in Singapore. I'm the acquisitions editor for books in social sciences. I actually cover East Asia and the Southeast Asia. Okay, my main subject areas are actually law, economics, business, and management. All right, so let's move on. The publishing landscape. Yes. So currently, I'm not sure if you are aware, but actually there are over 33,000 English language journals. Okay, actively publishing issues. Okay. Every month, every week, every year. Okay, so that number actually excludes about 9,000. Okay, 9,000 non-English journals. Okay, so these non-English journals are typically in the local native languages. Okay, and out of all these journals, okay, every year there are more than 3 million. Okay, 3 million articles. Imagine that, okay, being published each year, and these are the articles that are accepted for publication. So if you think about the acceptance rate, probably, you know, maybe at least 10 million articles circulating, okay, on the internet, okay, going through review, all kinds of review and processes and production at any moment. Okay, so imagine the huge number of articles being written and published. Of course, for books, it's not as many. I think there's around about 200,000 new books, okay, published each year. Okay, so of course the commercial publishers, the textbook publishers are all included in this. Okay. Within this market itself, okay, the academic publishing market, the lion's share of it actually goes to those science, technical, engineering, and medical publishers. So every year, their total revenue is estimated to be around 25 billion US dollars. And for those that are publishing only in the humanities, social sciences, it's only 1/10 of that, okay, 2.5 billion. And within these publishers, of course, there are a lot of different sizes. There are big global publishers. There are very small local or national publishers. But nevertheless, they are all contributing to the dissemination of scholarship of research that researchers are working on right now. So your challenge as a researcher is to make your paper stand out among all these other researchers who are also writing and publishing at the same time. Okay, and this landscape itself, the market itself has been changing quite rapidly actually over the last 2 to 3 years. Okay, of course in the past there was technology. Okay, previously journals were just print based. Okay, So they have individual issues published regularly, but since about maybe 15 years ago, when the technology arose that the digital or electronic journals are becoming the norm. Okay, so nowadays print issues are slowly being phased out, so only the digital versions are available. Okay. Similarly, for books is also getting more important. E-books is also getting more and more important, and of course, with this pandemic, is making it even more so-called crucial, okay, for researchers like yourself. Okay. And then open access, okay, journals and open access books, okay, so all this is another development. Okay, so I'll talk more about that later. Scholarly collaboration networks such as ResearchGate, academia.edu. Okay, this is like the Facebook equivalent, okay, for researchers like yourself, okay, to link up with various other researchers and also to publicize your published papers. Okay. And then we also have impact, like impact factors and a lot of other metrics like out metrics. And the last of all is free content. Okay, so currently there's a lot of free content available out there. Some are actually legal, so you are allowed to access them for free, but some are not so legal lah. So I think one of the most famous one is Science Hub. Some of you may have heard of it. Okay, so that's it for the publishing landscape for journals at least. Okay, so just a little bit about the press itself. Okay, so Cambridge University Press is an integral part of the University of Cambridge. We are considered as a large department of the university. So our HQ is of course in Cambridge, UK. We are actually the oldest publisher in the world. We were established around 1534. Of course, we only published our first book many years later. Okay. Even though we have been around for centuries, it doesn't mean we are not investing our resources and or thinking about the future. We are still putting up a lot of money and resources into ensuring that we are still relevant to our customers, our authors, and also to researchers and students. Okay, so we are investing a lot into digital publishing. So over here, I just have a long timeline of our history. So if you have the time later on, when we share the slides, you can of course have a look. In terms of the mission and the character of the press itself, okay, so we are actually registered or we operate as a not-for-profit press, okay, as a not-for-profit university press. Okay, any surplus, any additional profit that we earn are actually reinvested, okay, back to our publishing infrastructure, okay, services, okay, that we offer, and of course we do contribute about 10% of our surplus to the university for them to organize research projects or to to fund some other related educational initiatives. Okay. Even though we are a British university press, we are the global press. Okay, so we do work with the best scholars and the best universities all around the world. Okay, it's not just in the UK or in Europe, okay, or even the US. Okay, so that's the reason why I'm here. Okay, they have an editor based in Singapore, and we do have offices all over the world. Okay, we call them the publishing hubs. Singapore is one of them, Beijing, and of course in Delhi. Okay? And of course Sydney is one further south in Australia. In terms of quality, okay, so we have a very strong focus on ensuring that the kind of journals that we publish, the kind of books that we publish should all be of high quality. Okay, so that is fundamental to our existence. Okay, that's the only way we can match up to our parent university. Okay, so we don't affect the reputation of the university in that sense. So it's a little bit different, okay, on how we operate as compared to commercial publishers, especially the listed ones like Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, and so on. How do we achieve the quality that we want? Basically, we seek out the best authors and the journals. Okay, so peer review, we are very rigorous in that. Okay, and of course, all projects, all new projects, publishing projects have to be approved by the press syndicate. And how do we measure it? Okay, if you look at our past history, we have published a lot of Nobel Prize winners. Okay, even in our journals and books. Okay, and of course, within the 400 journals that we are currently publishing, we have a lot of journals that are top, okay, or top of the field in terms of impact factor. Of course, here are a few of them across all the various subject areas. And of course, we have the press syndicate. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, Press Syndicate is actually the governing body of Cambridge University Press. Okay, so Oxford University Press also has their governing body, as is the case with most other university presses. Okay, so for commercial publishers, they will probably be the management board or the editorial board, okay, that will actually approve new projects. For the syndicate itself, we call the members as syndics. Okay, so 18 members, and most of them are professors from various colleges and faculties of the university itself. Okay, so they always meet regularly to approve the new books and any new journals that we are publishing. Okay, so for books itself, regardless of whether you're a postdoc or a very experienced professor, you still need to go through the peer review process and also reviewed and approved by the syndicate. So we do not favor more experienced professors in this sense. So it's a very democratic process in this sense. Okay, next we are going to talk about the main the topic that you all are interested in, how to publish in international journals. Okay, okay. First off, I want to do a poll. Okay, okay. So just to find out, okay, so this poll is anonymous. Okay, so I wouldn't know who voted for what. Okay, basically what I want to do is just to find out among yourselves whether you have any experience publishing in international journals at least. Okay, so this is just for our feedback and just to gauge, okay, whether is this an important topic to include in future webinars or not. Yeah. So hope all you guys can just submit your post. Okay, so leave it there for another 30 more seconds. Okay. Okay. Okay, half of you have polling. Okay, so some of you have not entered. I guess you are not looking at it for the time being. Okay, I'll leave it open. Okay, right. Do I need to? Nope. Right. So it seems that again, some of you have published, some of you have not published. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I guess this will still be important for you. Okay, so let's move on. Hide this. Okay. Okay. Now we move on to what is a scholarly journal or academic journal. Okay, because even before you even start talking about publishing in a journal, you must know what is it all about. Okay, what is it meant to do? Okay, so there were actually only three basic functions at the start when the first so-called peer-reviewed journal or scholarly journals was published. Okay, many years ago, many years ago, and one of them is registration. Okay, so the idea is you want to publish in a journal so they can assert ownership of an idea. So an idea here will really probably mean the contribution of the paper that you're writing in. Okay, so by publishing in a journal, you own, okay, that so-called idea, the theory or the results in a sense. Okay, so you are known for that area or that specific part of the research. Okay. Secondly, okay, is for dissemination. Okay, when you as an author publish in a journal, and especially a good journal, and the results are read by a lot of people, researchers all over the world, you will be recognized for that kind of research you're doing, the good research that you've done. And also it would help in your career advancement. Okay, that means of course every year, you need to report to your chair or your department here, what have you published? Okay, oh, you have published a few top tier journals. Okay, that will help you in your promotion. Okay, in that sense. Okay, so dissemination does help to get you more well-known over the world, especially if it's an important and well-known journal, and also help to advance your career. Okay, and then the third function is archiving. Okay, you want to create a permanent record of what you have written or your research you have written. Okay, so the journals publishers will be responsible for doing archiving. Okay, they will make sure that every single issue, every single article is archived digitally. Okay, nowadays they have to do it digitally because it's cheaper. Okay, yeah, of course in the past it was pre-issues. They have to somehow find a way to archive it in big storage places. But nowadays it's not the case. So it's just digital archives, okay? And then over time, then there are two additional so-called cultural functions, okay? One of them is certification, okay? It's sort of quality assurance because it has gone through many rounds of peer review, at least for that journal itself. So it tells the rest, okay, this paper is of high quality, okay? So it has gone through a lot of revisions, okay, to meet the high standards of the journal, and of course, maybe the publisher. Then we have the next filtration, okay, filtration to really help researchers like self to navigate, okay, the large number, 33,000 journals, okay. So probably in your field itself, there are at least maybe 30 to 40 journals, okay. So by publishing in a specific journal, you are sort of telling others where you actually research, where your research is actually conducted in, okay, the kind of topics and the kind of research methods that you use, okay. So these are all the actual so-called functions that a scholarly journal will serve, okay. And for journals, what is the business model? Okay, so I think this is also important for researchers like yourself to know. Okay, so in the past, it was always subscription model. Okay, so basically what happens is a library would subscribe to either a single journal or a collection of various journals in a subject area. Okay, so readers and authors, they do not need to pay anything at all to either publish in it or to read it. Okay. So this has been the case for many years, but over the last 5 years, there's a move towards, or rather, there's more interest in journals becoming more open access. Okay, so open access here means go open access. I will talk more about this. Okay, in the later slides. So for open access journals, the author will need to find the funding to pay for a charge, which is called article processing charge, in order to publish in the journal. Okay, so typically most publishers would only ask for the APC, only request for the APC to be paid after the article has been accepted, okay, by the editor-in-chief, okay, after the many rounds of peer review. But certain journals with questionable practice, or what we always call them as predatory journals, may just say, okay, just pay me and I'll publish it, okay? And I'll call it a go open access journal, okay? Something like that, okay? So more on that later. So the good thing about open access is anybody can access it after it has been published online, okay? That means the libraries do not need to seek funding, okay, to pay for the subscription charges, and so neither does the readers need to do it, okay, and the researchers. Okay, so the only point where payment needs to be made is at the point of acceptance of the article, and the author will need to pay for it. Okay, so this was the case where, and actually the open access protocol movement started mostly in the life science journals, but now it's moving very rapidly across all the various journals in the sciences, the engineering, and even the medical journals. They're also moving to this model. But the moving to this model from a subscription model is not easy. Okay, it's not easy. So for the humanities and social sciences, this will still need time because it is, for them, it's not as viable as compared to the STM journals itself. All right. So I talk about what is a journal. Now let's tell you more about how to shortlist the right journal for a paper. Okay. So think about it. You have spent so many hours, so many days and weeks, okay, working on the research, conducting experiments, interviews, case studies, and then writing about it. Okay, then you have to think, okay, where can I publish it? Which journal? Okay, so firstly, you have to choose very carefully and thoughtfully. Okay? That means you have to aim for the right level of journal. Is it going to be a general, big journal, or a very specific, specialized journal? Okay, for your the paper that you're writing. And then you still need to think about what are the journals that actually publish the type of articles you're writing on. Okay, it is you're researching in history, Asian history. Of course, you've got to find the right journals that will publish in Asian history. Okay. Similarly, you must know who are the editors and editorial board members. Okay, so typically, if you are familiar with some of the more renowned researchers who are acting as editorial board or editors of a journal, then of course you may want to shortlist them too, because usually they will only accept to be an editor or or editor-in-chief of a journal if they feel the journal has a high standard. Okay. And then lastly, do you need to publish your paper in open access journals? Because nowadays certain researchers mandates or funders will say that you need to publish your paper or your research in open access. Okay, so that means it might limit the type of journals that you can publish in, because not all the subscription journals will offer an option for you to publish your article as go open access. So it's something to keep in mind. And then when it comes to selecting a journal, here are some steps you can follow. Okay, first one, hierarchy. So you must know the ranking of the journals in your field. Okay, definitely some schools and some departments, they will tell you, okay, these are the first top tier journals, or second tier or lower tier journals. Okay, so you have to know the rankings first, and then think about the research outcome for your paper. Okay, how significant are findings or argument itself. If your findings of your paper is very significant and have global impact, of course you will aim for a top tier journal. Okay, because that's what top tier journals are looking for, to publish articles that have global impact. Okay, because they are read all over the world. But if it's only for a specific region, then maybe you don't need to publish in a top tier journal, maybe a mid tier journal. Okay, so that the chances of acceptance is higher, because there are not that many people publishing in that journal. Okay, that doesn't mean it's not good. It just means that there's less interest from the readers. And of course, there's a lower tier journals are perhaps something that you may consider if the impact or the contribution of the paper is much less. Okay, so that is something you will need to sort it out on your own. Okay, so this is something you have to think through. Okay, then look at the readership. Okay, do you think the results of the paper will interest a very specialized group of researchers, or it will you will have interest among a very large group of maybe researchers in the field? Okay, so if you think it only caters to a very specialized group, then you will find out which are the journals that specialized group publishing. Okay, then you just target that journal. It's not, of course, you can target the other big name journals. Then look at the scope. Okay, once you have a shortlisted a few journals, look at the scope of the journal itself. Okay, usually they will list it on their homepage. Okay, just read it and see, does your paper fall within the scope? Okay, if it does, then of course good for you. Okay, if it doesn't, then perhaps you have to cross that out and select another one. Okay, then you look at the citations. Okay, does your own paper cite the other published articles in the journal that you want to publish in? Okay, okay, do not cite the other published articles just because you want to publish in that journal. Okay, you only cite it if it's only relevant to your research. Okay, so if it's relevant to your research, definitely the editor-in-chief will find relevance in the sense that you're sort of a continuing conversation between the previous author and yourself. Okay, so that will be helpful for him. Okay, of course, in the end, you will help boost up the citations a little bit, but still, this is sort of a clue to help you find out, okay, whether this journal is something for your paper or not. Next, of course, we have the SSCI, okay, impact factor. Okay, so what's the journal's impact factor? Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about that because frankly, there's been too much emphasis on it. But anyway, if your department or your school or your university says that it has to have an impact factor, so that means if you're publishing in a journal that has no impact factor, of course, that means you can't use it, okay, for your performance review. So perhaps you might just have to aim for another journal instead. Then look at the article type. Is your paper an original research paper, or is a short research commentary or things like that? Okay, so try to see if it matches the kind of articles the journal will publish. Okay, typically, they will explain it on the homepage, which are the article types that they accept. Okay. Punctuality. Okay, if you read the paper, read the journal they want to publish in regularly, you know is it published on time, as in the issues are always published at the same time every year, or is it always late, or are there certain issues where they only have 1 or 2 articles? Okay, that means it's under budget. Okay, so those are clues that tell you that the journal is problematic. Okay, either the editorial board or the publisher is problematic. So perhaps it's best to avoid those. Okay, so that you know the paper doesn't get jammed up there. Then you look at the editorial board and the publishers, of course, as I mentioned earlier. So if the editors and the editorial board members are renowned researchers, then definitely you know that the journal is very likely to be more difficult to publish in, okay? And probably of a slightly higher quality in a sense. And of course, the publishers, is it reputable? Okay, so probably I can cover that later in the predatory publishing part. And then lastly, open access. Do you need to publish in open access or not? Okay. So after you submit rather you select the journal, you have to start submit the paper, right? Okay. So what's the best practice to submit the paper to a journal? Okay. Firstly, okay, very important, abstract. Okay, number one. Okay, always look at the abstract. After you finish the whole paper, look at your abstract. Okay, your abstracts be very clear and informative. Okay, don't exceed the word limit. Okay, try to cover as much important or keywords in the abstract. Okay, so that you know when the editor-in-chief or the associate editor is reading the abstract during submission, they would be more clear about what your paper is all about. Okay. Secondly, of course, you have to obey the rules, okay, in instructions to contributors or authors. Okay. So unfortunately, every journal they will have their own style. Okay. So they will say, oh, you have to style the headings or the text, double space, single space, the kind of citation style you have to use, okay, things like that. So you have to follow that, okay, as what they have indicated on the homepage itself. So this is second. Okay. So thirdly, okay, make sure your paper is written in very good English. Okay. Make sure there is a conclusion. Okay. Otherwise, there's no point. There's no point in reading the paper. Is at the end of it, there's no conclusion. Okay. And the message that you want to convey to your readers, okay, it's very clear. Okay. So the readers are the ones that would comment on it or possibly cite the papers. Okay, so tell them what you think of the research itself. Okay. The next one, of course, is also quite important. You can only submit a paper one journal at a time. Okay, one journal at a time. Okay, don't submit to two journals at a time. Okay, so try your luck and then maybe submit the one paper with one title to one journal and then submit the same paper with a different title to another journal and see which one gets in. Okay, so usually this is tricky or could be dangerous in the sense that once you are found out by both journals, they can actually blacklist you. Okay, that means next time you may be banned from submitting the journal for a few years. Okay, so that's not good. Okay, that's not good. So do keep that in mind. And of course, you may have heard about immediate rejection. So it's actually desk rejection. Okay, so desk rejection happens for a lot of reasons, but typically is because after reading, okay, after the editor-in-chief acknowledges the receipt of your paper, and after reading it, then they see that, oh, English is not so good. I can't really understand what the author is writing or what he or she is trying to say. So no choice, I have to immediately reject it. Okay, that means it doesn't go through peer review at all. Okay, so it just gets rejected. Okay, or they find that there's no conclusion, not enough originality. Okay, originality also quite important for journals. Okay, or it's not important to their journal. They might say, or they might suggest you, go to another journal. Okay, or it's out of scope also. Then they could have spotted some scientific or logical flaws to the paper. Okay, so then they'll make the immediate rejection because they don't really want to spend too much time on sending out paper they don't think they want to publish. Okay, so that's the reason why for those popular or top tier journals, their rejection rates are very high. Okay, there are too many people submitting to the papers, but they haven't met all these so-called minimum qualification, minimum standards that they ask for. Okay, so important, as I mentioned, to tell the readers, okay, or the researchers that will read the journal that why is your paper important to them? Why is it important to the field? What is the contribution of the paper? Okay, state this very clearly in the abstract, introduction, okay, and the conclusion. Okay, so if you can do that, then it will be much easier, okay, for them to tell at a glance, okay, whether there's something they could, send out for review or not. And I mentioned earlier to write a clear and informative abstract. So the main reason is very few editors in chief will actually read the whole paper. Okay. The first thing they will read is the title. Okay. They will have a good title, then they'll read the abstract. Okay. And if the abstract is informative and clear enough, then they will then move on to certain parts of the paper. Okay. Certain parts of the paper, probably the conclusion. Okay. To find out all the methodologies. Okay. To find out, whether it's something that is worth sending off a review. Okay. So keep this in mind. Okay, I always remind all my uh, workshop participants, okay, to write a good abstract. Okay, and of course choose the right journal. Okay, make sure it's within scope. Sometimes you may have not read the scope and then it's out. That would mean wasted your time. Okay, because you got to reformat everything again to send to another journal. Okay, so that leads on to the next point on try to follow the instructions of contributors, because sometimes some editors are very particular. If you do not follow exactly what the instructions ask for, then they can reject you, okay, at submission. Okay. Now, of course, there's also a submission requirements. Okay, it depends. Okay, if it's single blind or a double blind kind of a peer review model, they would probably have specific requirements on how you are supposed to upload the paper with the title page or CV, cover letter also, and probably the figures and tables may have to be supplied separately as a separate file. Okay, so these are the kind of requirements that they ask for. So you have to find out what you need to do, okay, before you even upload it. So assuming that you're pretty sure how you're gonna, you know how to submit, you have selected the paper. Okay, now you have to write a final draft for the paper before you submit. Okay, so just to recap, a journal article has to be fit for purpose and original. Okay, so you write a journal article not because you are going to publish it in a newspaper or a magazine. It has to be in a journal. Okay, and of course, for journal articles, it has to be original. Okay, if you use another journal article and claim that it's not been published yet, then that is ground for so-called breach of the publishing ethics. Okay, so the journal can actually reject or withdraw or retract that paper itself. Okay, and they can ban you. Okay, so make sure it's original. Okay, it has to be understandable and written in good English if you want to publish in so-called international journals, because so far, of course, English is still the main language used for all these international journals, and you have to make it as organized as possible so that when people are reading through the whole paper, they can understand how the work flows. Okay, it has to be of appropriate length. Okay, so if there is a word limit for the article type for that journal, okay, make sure you are within the limits. Okay, don't try to exceed it. Okay, and lastly, the journal article has to be discoverable, stable, and citable. Okay, so this is actually just the responsibility of the publisher. Okay, make sure all the journal articles that are published can be searched and retrieved by other researchers, and there's always available online. Okay, always available and citable. Okay, so it has to create a DOI. Okay, to help people to cite it easily. So for a typical article, this is the kind of structure that we will normally see. Okay, there will be a title, abstract, keywords, and then we move on to the main text. Okay, main text could be along these lines, such as introduction, methods, results, and discussions. Okay, so this is not something that's set in stone. Okay, so it actually does varies between journals and also between subject areas also. Okay, and of course towards the end there will be typically there will be conclusions and of course acknowledgements. Okay, and sometimes you need to include a conflict of interest statement too, and definitely there'll be references and supplementary data if required. Okay, so some writing tips. Okay, so when you're writing the first paragraph or introduction to the paper, always try to avoid new definitions or formulas or specialized terms. Okay, so as not to get people a bit confused. Okay, the introduction is like an introduction. It should be written like an introduction. Okay, slowly lead the writer or rather the reader into what you are going to discuss about. Okay, so probably maybe the first few sentences you just talk about the background of the research, why was it necessary, and if you have created a new variable, a new term for it, then of course you can define it slightly after that. You don't just throw in a lot of jargon at the start, and then it makes it a bit hard for readers, okay, to really understand why is this research important. All right, and then you can write in shorter sentences. Actually, it's fine to write in short sentences. Okay, it's not something that's bad. Doesn't mean that if it's a journal article, it'll be very complicated, very long. Okay, because that makes it very hard to understand. Okay, especially if it's a single sentence that stretch across 7, 8 lines. Okay, so just write to the point. Okay, write straight to the point. Okay, try not to have too many grammatical or notational errors. Okay, because certain researchers are quite particular about it, and that will affect your peer review too. All right, and you have to try to test the readability of the paper. Okay, try to get a colleague from another field itself to comment, okay, whether they sort of understand what you're trying to say. Okay, they'll need to understand what the theory or the actual past, but they need to understand the English is readable. Okay, that means they can understand how you are trying to persuade the readers or the reviewers of your ideas or the importance of your research. So if you're doing empirical analysis, try to report the standard errors because this is something that's important to them. Okay, and of course the coverage sets or confidence intervals. And you come to plagiarism. Okay, so try to avoid this as far as possible to be professional and try to cite and acknowledge other works, other people's work if you have used them. Okay, you extracted some of the text, even figures and charts too. Okay, doesn't mean it's just text. It means if you use a figure that has been published in another journal, you have to seek permission to use it. Okay, in your own paper too. Okay, and exclusive submission, as I mentioned earlier, do not submit to more than one journal at a time. Okay, so I'm emphasizing this again because certain early career researchers might not be aware, but actually for journals, you can only submit to one journal at a time. So you will need to wait, okay? You need to wait for the journal to get back to you whether they are accepting it for review or they are going to reject it. Okay? Of course, after they rejected your paper, you can submit it to another journal. But meanwhile, you just have to wait. And authorship, okay, so there's something called a gift authorship. That means you add in a colleague or a friend as a co-author the paper as a gift. Okay, so but that is actually frowned upon. Okay, only include the authors or co-authors who have actually made some contributions, okay, to the article itself. Okay, certain journals will actually even ask you to list out what the co-authors did. Okay, so this is something to be aware of. Okay, try not to include or other people even without their permission. That is also something that is not ethical. Okay. So do not give out the authorship to other friends or family or even colleagues, and do not include other researchers' names in the paper without their permission or knowledge. Okay? And of course, you need to follow the style of the journal you want to publish in. Okay, you need to follow the style of the journal. Just look at the style sheet of the journal itself. They will usually be in the instruction to contributors or authors. Make your article concise. Okay, so here what we're trying to say is if possible, just keep to one idea in one single sentence. Okay, try not to put too many ideas or concepts or arguments into a single sentence. Okay, so that it is easier for a reader to digest. Okay? Then lastly, you can read the published articles from the other journals to see how yours can fit. Okay, you read how they write. Of course, you don't have to follow exactly how they write it. Okay, different people have different writing style, but for yourself, you can try to see how they write and see how they argue their contributions of the theory that they're proposing. Okay, so and then you phrase it in your own way. Okay. Okay, so it's now 3:45. Okay, I'll try to speed up a little bit. And then we have the next part. Okay, once you have submitted the paper to a journal, okay, so the journal editor says, okay, good. I think your paper has potential. So let's send it out for peer review. Okay. So this section, I'm going to talk about peer review. But first, I'd like to do another poll. I hope that's fine with you. Okay. So basically, I just want to know whether you know what are the type of peer reviews that we have. Okay, what are the type of peer reviews that journals use, okay, during the review process itself, okay. So just choose an answer which you think is correct, okay. It could be single blind and double blind, or double blind only, or can be the single blind, double blind, open peer review, or even single blind only, okay, for journals, okay. So just go ahead and contribute your answer, okay, at the time, anytime, okay. So until the next poll, I'll keep this open, okay. Now I'll just go into the actual topic itself. Wait, let me hide this again. All right. Okay. So actually now I'm going to tell you the actual models, or rather the actual peer review process you can encounter. Okay. So actually there are three types. Okay. Single blind, double blind, and something which we call or rather is known as open peer review. Okay. Open peer review. Okay. So this is how it works. For single blind, the reviewer will actually know the author's identity. Okay, so they were reading the paper and then they know, oh, this is written by who and who. Okay, for double blind, they will receive the paper. The reviewer will receive the paper, but there's no name on it. Okay, so they don't know who is the person who's writing it. And for open peer review, the other way is direct opposite of single blind. So the reviewer know who is the author, but the author also know who is reviewing the paper. Okay, so that's why it's open. It's not blind in that sense. Okay. So single blind is usually used among science journals, okay? Double blind for social sciences and humanities journals. And for open peer reviews, of course, open access journals are using that. Not all of them, but some of them are using that. But growing number of journals are actually switching to this, okay? Okay, so more about this later, but definitely you should be aware that there's a different kind of peer review model called open peer review. And of course, there's even something even more radical. Okay, so it's called post-publication peer review. Okay, so this started in the last few years, and it's actually used by experimental open access publishers. Okay, so what happens is the manuscript are reviewed after they have been published online. Okay, so they don't wait for the review to complete before they publish it. They publish first. Okay, publish first online. Then the reviewers are invited to go and read it and comment on it. Okay, so they invite readers to do it. So it's not for everybody who wants to comment, they can go in and review. So they invite readers to do it because the readers' names and relations will be published for everyone to see. Okay, then the author will, of course, respond to any of the concerns and make the necessary revisions to the paper before uploading a new version online again. And then this process will go on and on until the editor-in-chief of the journal says, okay, stop, I think we have done enough revision. Okay, there's no more improvement we can do. Okay. So this is how it works for this post-publication peer review. So it's only a few journals that are trying this out, okay, just for your information, okay. So you can see the examples there, all right. And then let's talk about the peer review stages, okay. So there's typically a few stages, but the main one will be the first one is the desk review stage. So the editor-in-chief will, of course, upon submission of the paper, assess whether it is suitable for for the journal in terms of aids and scope. And they look at the language, things like that, okay, and whether they like the way the research was framed, okay. If they say, yes, I want to review it, then of course they will then seek out possible experts, okay, to review the paper, okay. And typically it'll be at least two reviewers. So a lot of people in the past have asked me, okay, how do you know the acceptance rate of a journal, okay, at desk review, okay. So it's not so easy to compare, especially if you are comparing between fields. Okay, for medical journals, the acceptance rate is quite low because that's the only output format that is recognized in their field. Okay, so they don't really write research books. Okay, but if you look at the literature, okay, those who are studying literature, the acceptance rate is actually quite high. That's not because it's not a good journal. It's because literature scholars need to write books. Okay, so they prefer to write books than publish in journals. Okay, so that's the reason why you see there's a wide variance in acceptance rates. Okay, so between publishers and within publishers itself, the journals that they publish, the acceptance rates can also vary a lot. Okay, so this actually depends on how frequent the journals publish. Okay, if for a journal that publish a lot of issues every year, of course, if they do not have high submissions, then of course the acceptance rate will be higher. But if for journals that only publish 1 or 2 issues a year, and each issue maybe 6 to 8 articles, then of course the acceptance rate will be much lower than that journal within the same field itself. Okay, so this is something to look about. But that being said, of course, most publishers nowadays they do list some of the these factors, okay, or rather the metrics, okay, on the journal's homepage. Okay, but if you are keen, you can also just send a short email to the editor-in-chief to find out whether it's worth your while. Because if the acceptance rate is very low for the journal, and you don't want to waste time waiting for them to come back to you, or then you can approach another journal. Okay. Secondly, you move if at the peer review stage. Okay, so the reviewers will need to read through the whole paper and comment it. Okay, provide suggestions to improve the paper. Okay, so double blind or single blind, it depends. Okay, it takes about 4 to 8 weeks. Okay, certain article types can actually take only 1 or 2 weeks. Okay, so there's a so-called rapid research article or something like that. Okay, so those are more from the sciences where they want it to be published as soon as possible. So the reviewers have a very short time to read and comment and make sure the authors also get to review and revise the paper before it's finalized. Okay, so within different fields, the time for peer review can vary a lot. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so once the editor-in-chief receives the 2 reports, then he or she will then decide, okay, whether to go ahead and accept with revisions, or say no, we want the author to do more revisions, so it will revise and resubmit, or they think that the reports are not so great and they are actually not supportive, so you will have to decline or reject the paper after the peer review. Okay. So typically, very few papers are actually accepted at the first round of review. Very few. Okay. Even if you're a Nobel Prize winner, that doesn't mean that after you write the paper and the first round, then you get accepted. That's not really the case. Okay, so just don't be discouraged if you get a revise and resubmit. Okay, because typically most papers have to go through at least 2 or 3 rounds of revisions before they are actually accepted. Okay, to be published in the journal itself. Okay, so just keep this in mind, okay, if you do receive such a revise and resubmit decision. So over here, I have a workflow for you. Okay, so you can see how the paper moves along. Okay, so of course it moves to editor, screen the paper, send out for review. Then the editor will access the review, author revisions, and send back to the reviewers again. And reviewer says okay, then you can get it accepted and published. All right. So after you have revised the paper, you need to send it back to the reviewers. So you need to respond, okay, to provide a response letter, okay, to the reviewers too. So here are some tips for you. Okay, so be respectful, okay, and acknowledge the time and care the referees have taken. Okay, thank them for their effort and time. Because most of the time they are not paid for it. And do engage positively and constructively with the criticisms. Okay, don't be too defensive, aggressive. Okay. I know certain reviewers can be quite nasty and they might engage in some personal attacks, but if you think it's not nice to do so, you can reflect or feedback to the editor-in-chief that why is this reviewer being so personal, okay, on the paper itself, okay. Otherwise, if it's just a very truthful kind of criticism, just engage it positively, don't be defensive. Otherwise, when the reviewer reads your response, then he or she may also respond negatively. Okay, that means your paper will be again rejected. Okay, so we don't really want that to happen too many times. Okay, so the way you respond is by either the themes common in the both reports, or you just address the issues brought up in reviewer A, and then you all move on to reviewer B. Okay. Either way actually works. Okay, it is not a must to do in one way or the other. Okay, so it's quite flexible in that sense. When you're writing the response, be clear what you agree with. Okay, which are the things you agree with for the reviewer A or reviewer B, and then what you disagree with. Okay, it's not necessarily the case that you have to agree with everything the reviewers suggest or comments. Okay, you can actually say no. Okay. But of course, if you say no, you have to tell them, okay, why you don't agree with what they said, and how you propose to clarify or improve of it. Okay, it could be some miscommunication, or the way you wrote it, they had that impression. Okay, so these are the things you can include in the response. And then now I move on to publishing ethics. Okay, so this is an important topic too, even though it's not as well covered in many webinars. So basically, we are a member of the Committee of Publication Ethics, which is not-for-profit body that help journal editors to advise them on ethical issues related to journal publishing. Okay? So over here you have a case where the author requests permission to publish or review comments that they have received, okay, online. So it's not allowed. Okay, the process, the peer review process, is considered confidential between the reviewers and authors themselves. Okay, so you are not supposed to make it known online publicly. We have another case where the author of rejected paper actually publicly names and criticizes the peer reviewer. Okay, so this is surprising because the author actually know who is the peer reviewer, even though it's a single blind or double blind process. So basically, the editor-in-chief, of course, went back to the author and told him or her that it's not right to do so. Okay, that's not very right. And so the author just admit his mistake and apologize publicly, okay, to the reviewer. Okay, even if the peer reviewer makes a nasty remarks, you still shouldn't do such a thing. Okay, because it's not right. Okay. The author requests certain experts not to be included in the editorial process. Okay, so this is a bit tricky because certain journal editors will say, okay, I accept your recommendation, as in you don't ask this person to review the paper, since you may have given a proper reason for doing so. But for other journals, they'll say, no, it's our prerogative. Okay, so we decide who to send out for review. You don't decide, you're just the author. Okay, so it depends on the journal for time being. So another author also excited, okay, the paper was accepted in the paper, in the journal, that he or she published it, okay, whole manuscript on an external website, okay, not the journal's homepage, but on maybe their own homepage, okay, that anybody can download, okay, before it was even published in the journal, okay, even though the decision is that they will accept it, but it hasn't gone through the production process, it's not been published in the journal, okay, so this is something you can't do, okay, as an author, okay, you still have to wait. Okay, you have to wait. Okay, so there are some so-called embargo involved. Of course, this applies to non-open access journals, but if you are publishing in a non-open access journal, there will be a waiting period, okay, before you can publish the actual paper, or rather make it available freely to anyone who wants to download it. Okay, and the last case is that an author sends a gift to the editor of the journal, okay, when the manuscript is being reviewed, okay, either in-house or with an external peer reviewer. Of course, this is very clearly a conflict of interest. All right, the editor cannot accept the gift and returns it. Okay, otherwise it might be seen as not being favorable to the review process. Okay, for the author. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, don't do such. Don't carry out such deeds, okay, while your paper is being reviewed. And here are also other ethical issues that you may come across, such as duplicate submission, okay, plagiarism, not enough citations, okay, non-disclosure of conflict of interest. Okay, this is usually for the pharmaceutical sciences, because they have drugs. They work with researchers work with drugs a lot. Drug companies quite a fair bit. Significant errors in publication. Okay, if you discover a significant error, you should inform the journal, even if the paper has been published, okay, so that they can do a errata or amendment. Not conforming to national, local, and institutional laws and requirements. Okay, this is more related to human or animal trials. Okay, and of course copyright issues. Okay, if you are using a third-party materials such as images, maps, figures, please do get permission first before you actually send it on together with the manuscript to the journal publisher. Okay. So now we've completed the main bulk of the webinar. So now I'm going to talk about open research. Okay. So what is open research? Open research actually refers to all practices, okay, that promote openness, integrity, reproducibility in research, okay. So it will mean that it will be faster and transparent in terms of the publication, okay, and that will of course include open access, and it encompasses research outputs, okay, journal articles, data, and also code, okay. So open research also refers to all practices that open science practices, okay, such as data sharing, study pre-registration, and open access journals. So what does it really mean? It means you publish in OA journals, you share your data, you share your code, you share workflows, like you share everything. Okay. And of course, there are ways to do that. Okay. So they have different stages, the planning stage, the active stage, and the end stage. Okay. So basically at the planning stage, you just register your research project. Okay. Okay. In a way, it's also helpful so that you know who's the one to start working on the research project. Then you can use that as proof. Okay. So I started this project first before you, okay, before another competing researcher. And then the active stage, you will of course share the methodologies of your preprints, okay, and register your studies. And then at the end stage, when you need to publish it, okay, you do it in the OA journal, or you have to deposit in the OA repository, okay, depending on where you publish or what's the mandate for your funders, from your funders. And then let's move on, open science and open data, okay. So open science is more specific. So open science is the practice of science in such a way that others can collaborate and contribute, okay. Research data, lab notes, or other research processes really available, okay. So you don't restrict the access. And under the terms that enable reuse, redistribution, and reproduction of the research and its underlying data and methods, okay. So there are 4 pillars of open science. The first one is data, okay. So just make sure you know your data sets and BOIs also posted on public repositories, licensed at CC, okay. But when you are sharing data, you need to take a lot of things into consideration, again, such as commercial, personal sensitivity, data protection standards or regulations, or ethics, okay, privacy, and how you're going to manage and share it, okay. So these are the things you have to keep in mind. And then the second pillar is code, okay. You use open source standards that can be installed on GitHub or elsewhere that's easily accessed. So what's the license you're going to use for the code? Is it going to be a CC license or a GNU license, okay. And then the third part, or the third pillar, is papers. Okay, you publish the papers in OA journals only. And lastly, the last pillar is reviews. Okay, open peer review. Okay, the process should be open peer review. And then in terms of data, we also have something called open data. So it relates to how fair is your research data. Is it findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable? Okay. So the data, of course, need to be stored somewhere online. So these here are some of the few data repositories that you are able to access or use, okay, for specific researchers. Okay. And of course, we have this joint declaration of data citation principle. So that means that if you want to cite the data from any of the public repositories, okay, you need to have all these principles in mind. Okay, so it has to be important. The credit attribute, who own the data, okay, the evidence, the unique identification, the access, persistence, specificity, and verifiability, interoperability, and flexibility. Okay, so you want to know more, you can just go to the source and have a read. Okay, and then open peer review. Okay, open peer review. So why would we need to do? Why can't we just stick to the single blind or double blind peer review? Okay, so here are some of the reasons. Okay, so there's full transparency about decision making. Okay, so that there's no bias against researchers who are non-whites, okay, or who are female, gender, things like that. Okay, so these are the hot issues nowadays for peer review. Okay, so we also enable reviewers to collect their contributions as part of the academic record. So contribution to review. Okay, so how can peer review, open peer review, be carried out? Okay, so it will be mainly the authors will know who has reviewed the submission, and the accepted manuscript will be published with the review reports. Okay, and the reports will include the reviewer's name, the author ID, and also it will also be assigned an individual DOI. Okay. However, reviewers and authors are not supposed to contact each other directly. Okay, so of course that could cause some problems. Okay, So definitely the communication will have been done through the journal's editorial officers. Okay. How about Cambridge? What are we doing for open research? Okay. So currently we are hoping to transform our OA journal program to 100% fully OA. Okay. Some of our journals are just hybrid OA. So that means they're still subscription based, but we allow specific articles to be published all open access. The other way is we are trying to provide authors, okay, easy way to publish the research, open access through read and publish agreements, which we have signed a few all over the world. We have also launched our so-called open research platform for preprints, which we call Cambridge Open Engage. We build a social sharing service called Cambridge Core Share, okay, so that you can share any journal articles published on Cambridge journals, okay, online, okay, easily. We also have sustainable and transparent open policies, okay, ensure all stakeholders, okay, have the information and support they need, okay, to continue to produce and use our research results. Or rather the research results published under our journals. We also work with our journals that encourage and support authors, okay, in sharing the code, the data, you know, and other materials, okay, that underlie the research that they are doing on. So we have two journals that are using open peer review, okay, for your information, okay. So one is quantitative plant biology, and the other one is QRB discovery, okay. If you're interested, you're publishing in this field, you can go and have a look. Now I'm going to talk about preprints. Okay, what is a preprint? I think some of you may have heard of the term before, but you are still unsure. To be frank, there's no clear definition of what is a preprint. It can be all of the things that we have listed here. Okay, so it can be anything at all. Okay, as long as they have not undergo any peer review and they are not already published in a journal or even in a book. Okay, all these are considered as preprints. Okay. So the history of preprint servers, or that's where they are so-called deposited. They were first embraced by the physical science scholarly community. Okay, so it was the early 1990s of archive.org. Okay, so this is an open online repository. Okay, so they will just deposit their early research into the repository. And then about 13 years later, a similar preprint servers for the other sciences then started. So nowadays there are a lot of such preprint servers. Okay, so what are the benefits and of course the cons? First off, you can share a work quickly. Okay? Once you submit online, people may get to see it and they may tell you, okay, you have a mistake, or you make a mistake, okay, or I think this is a very good paper, you can submit to this journal, things like that. Okay, encourage collaboration among colleagues in your field, like I mentioned earlier. If it's other colleagues who are working in the same topic, but using different methodology, and they read yours and they say, okay, let's collaborate and we work on a different research project. Okay, so it does help in the collaboration part. Helps researchers to discover early and non-traditional open access research. Okay. Get analytics on early research outputs. Okay. So you can also know how many people have read your papers or download it, things like that. Or even so-called tweet it, social media, things like that. And of course, you can build audience, okay, for the research before the formal publication in a journal. But with this pandemic happening, there is an explosion. Okay, there's really an explosion of preprints posted online. Okay, and some have very serious issues. Okay, for example, in February earlier this year, so a paper about COVID-19 was posted on Bio Rights. However, it was withdrawn. Okay, so because there was some criticism about the study's methodology and arguments. Okay, so there is some debate on the risk associated, okay, with non-vetted papers. Okay, that means not reviewed papers distributed through the preprint servers. Okay, so the claim is that traditional journal publishing model actually does help filter out such so-called junk science. Okay, but that remains to be seen. Okay, because even for traditional journal publishing model, there are still a lot of retractions happening every month, every year. Okay, so it's not necessarily the case if you publish a paper in a journal, then it's good. Okay, so we'll keep that in mind. Over here, I've listed a few, okay, subject preprint servers, okay, for information. Okay. The last one, sub preprints, is something we have partnered with the American Society of American Political Science Association, okay, to cater to their community. So there are also national and regional preprint servers, okay, and by publishers too, commercialized in the sense, okay. Okay. So this is ours, which we call Cambridge Open Engage, okay. If you have the time and you have some interest, okay, just go to the URL then have a look, okay. You may also want to upload your early research onto the server itself, okay. So we do carry out we do carry out a sort of a very brief review to make sure that it's suitable, okay, before we upload it. Now to open access, okay. So what's the definition of open access? Okay, it's research that are freely available, permits any users to read, download, copy, distribute, print, search, or link, okay, to these articles, okay. Spiders can index it, pass them as data to the software, and then use it for any other lawful purpose by readers or any other persons who have access to the internet, okay. So you don't need to pay, you don't need to download any software, you can just access it, then we will consider it as open access. So why do we need to publish open access? Okay, so for us, rather for most of the authors, they have to comply with the funding mandates. Okay, so certain, because they apply for funding from research, rather the universities or the ministries, okay, or independent organizations. Okay, so all these institutions will say you have to publish your research open access. Okay, so then they have no choice to mainly comply with the requirements of their research projects. Okay. Secondly, you can maximize, okay, the distribution of the research output for the benefit of society. Okay, when you publish open access, that means anybody can read it. Okay, so anybody can read it. So it does ensure that nobody is sort of at a disadvantage just because they do not have access to a subscription to a journal. And the third one is, of course, maximize the returns on investment on funds used. Okay, so basically, this is more related to the fundings. Okay. It also allow people to access research, okay, without paying for it, without needing to find money to pay for it. Increase the visibility and usage of your work, okay, and greater return on investment. And of course, it's educational and other users. Okay, Go open access work can be reused. Okay, you don't need to get permission from the authors of the journals. You can just use it. Okay, and of course, depends on the license, but typically you can just use it in your lecture notes. Okay, you don't even need to ask them for permission to do that. Okay? But of course, definitely you shouldn't sell it. Okay, that will be more commercialized. So it depends on the CC license that is used for that Go open access article. Okay, and of course, it's help professionals, okay, outside of academia who may need to rely on some this research to benefit their work. Okay, so you look at the current numbers. Okay, how many Go open access journals are there? Almost 15,000. Imagine that. Okay, 15,000. Okay, and about 5 million. Okay, 5 million articles published. Okay, so all these numbers I have got it from the Directory of Open Access Journal, the Registry of Open Access Repositories. Okay, so from the various websites itself. Okay, so you want, you can just go and have a look. So in terms of the licenses, these are the 4 licenses typically used. Okay, doesn't mean it's published open access. There is no copyright. The copyright still either resides in the journal or publisher or with the author. Okay, but it's just CC license, or rather we call it the Creative Commons license, is allows, okay, it's a sort of allows other people who are not the author nor the publisher to use the work in any way they like. Okay, so if you are using a CC BY license, you just need to attribute, you just need to cite the name, the journal, where you got it from, and then use it in any way you like. Okay, even commercial ways also, they don't care. They use it, just go ahead. Of course, the most strict one is the CC BY NC and D. Okay, you cannot translate it, you cannot use it in another way. You want to use it for commercial purposes, ask for permission again from the publisher. Okay, so just be aware of all these different licenses. So within journals itself, there are only actually one type of Go open access journals we usually call Go open access. Okay, so author needs to pay the APC. Okay, but the thing is, the access is free. Okay, once the article is published online, it's free immediately. Okay, anybody can access it, read it, and download it. Okay, there will be a CC license involved. Okay, it depends on the journal itself and the publisher. Okay, you can ask the journal what's the license that they use. The fees can range from $500 to 4,500. Okay, so the range is still quite wide and it varies between publishers too. And how to publish open access? Okay, you need to find a journal that's purely go open access, or you publish in an open access journal that's hybrid. That means it allows specific articles to be published in it, even though they are subscription journals. For green open access, it just means that it caters to traditional subscription journals. That means you can't find a go open access journal to publish your paper. So you just have to archive an earlier version of the paper. Okay, earlier version, because that means it's free. Okay, but no payment needs to be made to anybody at all. Okay, and you still own the copyright to that earlier version. You know? So you need to see the green open access policies for each publisher. Okay, they will have policies. They might say, okay, you still need to wait the 6 months, okay, after the article is published before you can do the archiving. Okay. Okay, the last topic is on predatory journals and conferences. Okay. Now I'm going to do a third poll. Okay. I hope you guys are fine with that. Okay. And then just to find out if any of you, okay, have been approached by any predatory journals before. Okay. This year at least. That means they will send you an email, you know, asking you to publish in their journals. Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay. So let me. Okay. Oops. Close share screen here. Okay. Behind this. Okay, let me move on. Okay, so just let me know. Okay. So you may think, okay, what is a predatory journal and predatory conferences? Okay, so there's no conclusive definition at all. Okay, nobody can tell you what they are, but we can tell it when we see it. Okay, so it's really like some journals are actually low quality, but they are not predatory. Okay? Predatory journals typically are go open access due to the model they have used, okay, the business model they have used, and they usually do not do any peer review, or the peer review is very superficial. The comments are very superficial. Okay? They may just do a spell check in the first place. We don't know. Okay, we don't know. And it's usually they call it a pay to publish model. Okay, so you just pay, we publish, that's all. Okay, we don't even bother with peer review. Okay, so regarding conferences, predatory conferences, so basically it's same thing, pay to attend. Okay, you just go to the conference, but nobody actually discuss your paper, and they don't really know what the paper is all about. So you're wasting your time and money to prepare for the conference. Okay. So here are two websites you can use. Okay. As a checklist, okay, for predatory journals on conferences. If you don't have the time, okay, just go to these two websites. Otherwise, you can just go through what I've listed here. Okay, how to identify predatory journals. Okay, is it indexed in DOAJ, Scopus, or Web of Science? Okay, do note that some are actually indexed in DOAJ, but once they are aware that it's a predatory journal, they will drop it. Okay, so this is something you keep in mind. Look at their editorial address, or rather the address of the editorial office itself. Is it actual office, or is it just a residence? Okay, or is it just a mail forwarding address or PO box? How about editorial board members? Do you know them? Do you know them well? At least are they from a good university itself, or do they look very suspicious? Okay, and do they ask you to pay before the peer review starts? Okay, if they do that, then it's very likely most quite sure that they are predatory journals. Sometimes they may list misleading journal rankings or impact factors, such as universal impact factor, journal impact factor, or global impact factor. Okay. Then they may say, oh, they are indexed in Web of Science, they have an impact factor, they are indexed in Scopus, but actually they are not. Okay, so something you can check with Scopus and Clarivate, which is the publisher for Web of Science. Okay. And when did they start publishing? Okay, did they started within the last 5 years? If so, then there's a higher chance that it could be a predatory journal. Okay, because this is the time where they can take advantage of researchers like you. Okay, who needs to publish. Okay? So also look at the ISSN. Is it a valid ISSN or is it a fake ISSN? Okay? If it doesn't even have an ISSN, then don't bother to submit it. Look at the peer review policy. Okay, is it clearly stated or not? Okay, if it very fast, the peer review is like 1 week, and they come back, then you have to be very suspicious because that's quite unlikely to be the case. I mean, the fastest is usually 4 weeks, but if it's 1 week and the comments are very short, then it's either a very low quality journal or it's a predatory journal because the review is not thorough at all. Be aware that the journal title doesn't reflect impact. Okay, doesn't mean that if they use international or city, country name like maybe Cambridge Journal of so and so research, doesn't mean that it's a very good journal. Okay, because there is no restriction on journal publishers using a city, country name, okay, in their journal title. Okay, and of course another way is to look at the bills list. Okay, so 2 URLs here for you to look. And sometimes they don't have any articles listed or they have not published anything at all, okay? Or they have missing archives in certain years. So this is very suspicious too. Okay. So if you see the single article appearing in more than one journal published by the same publisher, then you know that it's something wrong. Okay. You can avoid them. And do they have any policies for digital preservation, such as Portico, Logs, JSTOR? If not, then also quite suspicious. Or sometimes they hide the relationship with for-profit partner companies. Okay, sometimes you will know this, but if you come across, then you may see, that this is not probably a good journal to publish in. And there's also a commercial, so-called blacklist, okay, produced by Cabels, okay, but this is you have to pay for it, so maybe not for people who don't have the funds, okay, or the library doesn't subscribe to it. And how about predatory conferences? Okay. So usually for these kind of conferences, they skip or they don't even do any peer review of the papers, okay? And they are run by for-profit companies, okay? But they say they are not for-profit, okay? And they claim to publish your papers in their predatory journals, or they never publish conference proceedings, okay? They may have an overly ambitious title, there they use international or global buzzwords as usual, or the technical program is too broad. Okay, combine too many disciplines in a single day, it gets a bit confusing. Okay, and they always say that interdisciplinary, so you have to be very careful for such conferences. If the language on the website is clumsy, a lot of spelling, grammar mistakes, or poorly written, then you have to be more careful. They may claim that some organizations are sponsoring their conference, but it could be the case they are just misusing it. Okay, that means they just use the logos without permission. And if the contact details of organizers are missing or incorrect, this is something also something you have to be careful about. Okay, just don't attend such conferences. Or there's another conference but it has a similar name, so they are just trying to copy. Okay, it's a fake conference in a sense. Okay, they might just take the money and then they will never organize the conference. Some conferences also linked to predatory journals and publishers, or they charge very high registration fees, or they hold the conferences many times every year. Okay? I mean, it's a way to earn money, but note that those certain societies do hold 2 or 3 conferences each year, but these are legitimate conferences because they are organized by societies and not commercial companies. Okay, so now I've managed to reach the end. I think I took a little bit more time than I expected. Okay, so there are some resources and services I can recommend to you. So if you need any of these, you can just go to them. I also listed those from other publishers for convenience. Okay, translation, editing services, some of the books that we published that might be useful for you. So thank you very much. And now I have the last poll. Okay, just to get some feedback, okay, quick feedback, okay, whether all the topics that I've covered in this webinar, is it useful? All right, okay, and I hope you can provide me your answers, and as usual, all the polls are anonymous, so you will know who is who, okay. Now we come to the end of the presentation, so Q&A. Okay, or you can find us. Okay, you want to connect with us on our social networks such as Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Okay, just go to all these addresses. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. ขอบคุณครับ